Okay, I'm here with expert water scientist, better known as a hydrologist, Dr. Berg, and we're going to have the hot topic conversation about AI and data centers. How is that going to impact us here in Texas?
Wow, that sure is a topic everybody wants to talk about and can't get enough of. The big question is, how are you going to cool what is inside a giant building? And then what is the power source for the way that you cool what's inside of that giant building? So the answer is it could be a lot of water or not all that much. But again, I think understanding what the community is actually going to need in terms of impact, that's a big conversation that has to happen between a data center and the people that live there or want to live there. So it's got to be something that happens as a relationship and not just a race to get something built. So I'm always a fan of conversation, collaborative planning. That sometimes has been the case. I'd like to see a lot more of it.
If we decide to lean more heavily on water to be the main fuel source, so to speak, are we equipped for that? Where would the water come from?
Wow, that answer really depends on where you are in Texas. Some places have maybe a little bit more water than others, but no one's really swimming in a bunch of extra water supplies. So it's going to be a question of, are we going to try something new or more of what we have in the past? And the easiest water is water that you already have. That could be things like fixing leaks, water conservation programs to hold on to what you have. But in some cases, that might be developing new water sources. And that could be desalinating water from the coast, bring that inland. It could be going way deep underground and getting some water that's a little bit dirtier and treating that. Sometimes that's a little bit salty too. We can take some of that out. But the easy water is gone. We're going to make some hard choices, and it's probably going to be some trade-offs of what does Texas look like going forward.
I imagine projects like that require some substantial funding. Where is that going to be coming from, and how is it impacting me?
Right, so the state of Texas has a pretty robust funding program for a bunch of different kinds of water projects. And just last year, they allocated a whole bunch more. But that doesn't happen by itself. It needs a lot of people saying, we want more of this, but also going through the work of what project is the right fit for the right place. So it goes back to making sure everyone weighs in on what they want to see. If there's a project that doesn't maybe fit the character of a community, people can let that know too. And really nudge for decisions as a community.
Is there going to be an out-of-pocket cost for me? Am I going to feel that?
One of the good things about that state funding program is it's off of tax receipts. So the things that you pay for already. So it's not a direct cost. But one of the things that everybody's feeling with everything right now is the rising cost of everything in our lives. And at the same time, one of the things that we've been way underpaying for is all of our water infrastructure. And the federal government really isn't paying for it anymore. So we almost need to kind of catch up even while everything else is so hard. So a lot of cities and water authorities do have to raise their rates just to stay level. Losing water from the system, maintaining what's already there. So to add new projects, we're probably gonna have to pay collectively, all of us, a little bit more just to keep the life going that we do need and appreciate.
So that rising cost that you were talking about, that would be with or without the AI infrastructure that we're talking about, most likely.
That is a tricky one. We're all going to have to be raising rates regardless.
Yeah. Now on the flip side, is there a potential big benefit for this type of infrastructure, this new development here in Texas?
Yeah, that's another complicated question that people are really wrestling with right now. And it kind of comes down to how much do you value tax receipts for a county or for a jurisdiction, employment versus some of the other things that maybe change the way the community feels and works. So those are some of the things on the economic side that can provide some drivers for some local economies. I know in less developed and maybe some rural areas are maybe raising their hand and saying we want some of this to jumpstart some of the things that we want to do, but it's not uniform. And some people really wonder if that fits with the way they want their community to be, and that answer is going to be different everywhere.
Why would some rural counties or rural communities say, no, we're banning it?
So, to use some numbers that are out there, you move out the country because you like the lifestyle, and then somebody buys up 40,000 acres to put a data center on all of it.
Okay.
40,000 acres. Like,
okay.
My brain can't even think of that. Like, it's
massive.
enormous.
Yeah.
And like that just changes the everyday life.
Am I gonna have a say in that? If, somebody starts building something in my backyard, 40,000 acres, not the lifestyle I had planned or wanted or signed up for?
That's a big question people are asking, for sure. I'm always a proponent of very early, very intentional and sustained stakeholder engagement. So anybody who's going to be impacted by a project, working with them directly. And each community is going to maybe have a little bit different answer to that. We've seen some of these Texas actually be canceled very recently because it didn't fit with what the community was really maybe going for. There's too much opposition. But at the same time, some are saying we can maybe do that, but then that requires those communities working with the potential project developers to say, okay, if you're going to come here, we're going to work with that. You need to not just mitigate for the things that you're doing to us, but you also need to make sure that you benefit our community a lot. So we've seen some postponed, some canceled, and a lot of this is really working out, but it's a question of values and fit. Does what a project is going to look like, does that fit with what a community already looks like and wants to in the future? We've seen some of East Texas actually be canceled very recently because it didn't fit with what the community was really maybe going for. There's too much opposition. But at the same time, some are saying we can maybe do that, but then that requires those communities working with the potential project developers to say, okay, if you're going to come here, we're going to work with that. You need to not just mitigate for the things that you're doing to us, but you also need to make sure that you benefit our community a lot. So we've seen some postponed, some canceled, and a lot of this is really working out, but it's a question of values and fit. Does what a project is going to look like, does that fit with what a community already looks like and wants to in the future?
Well, now you did catch my attention. Now you're speaking my language. If there's a potential benefit or a way for the community to make money, what would that look like?
Well, maybe not directly to you, but for the community as a whole, maybe that means an increase in tax revenues, which is almost always the case. There might be some employment opportunities involved in those big buildings. The numbers aren't always very big, but if you're a small community, then you can definitely raise your hand, potentially be one of the people that works on the inside. But I think the big get is for communities to pool their voices together and say, okay, if you're coming in, we want you to invest in this project or this priority or this value that really meshes with our community, and kind of advocating for single projects that you can really be proud of. And I think that's going to be where the real wins are, is not necessarily for a single person, although landowners that sell large tracts will probably cash in immediately. But communities as a whole, if they welcome data centers in, making sure that they provide the things that make that community thrive even more.
Final thoughts on the data centers. Are you excited? Are you skeptical? Optimistic?
Ooh. Is this, I need to gather my own thoughts. It's going really fast. So there are a bunch planned, a bunch have already been built, and the conversation evolves every single day. There's a new development, there's a new news story. I am naturally skeptical. I have seen some good things, but I'm really curious to see how communities will elevate their voices to get what they want to continue to grow into the future.
Okay. Is it one of those things that's kind of like ready or not, here it comes?
Absolutely. It is already coming. A lot of it is already here or on the cusp. So it's in the conversation in those communities and in our communities right here. So it's going to be a question of how does that relationship stay, not just now, short term, but if you're going to be in a community for a century, this is big infrastructure. What's that going to look like decades from now? And we can push things, I think, to be good neighbors for the long term.
Wow.